What's up, Pod Pals? It's your buddy Adam from Podcasting Business School. It's the show where I teach podcasters how to love their show like a hobby and build it like a business. And today we've got one of my favorite business building pod pals, Jan Ditchfield from the No BS Business School in the house. Jan is one of my favorite people. We've been working together a little bit on her business, but I'm also a giant mega fan of her podcast, No BS Business School. She is highly skilled. I was like, begging Jan, please, you have to come on the show and talk business funnels, all the things. So Jan, I'm very excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Oh, this is awesome. It's really surreal because I listen to your intro all the time. And now I'm like, wow, I'm here live hearing it. So it's a very different experience. So thank you for having me here, Adam.
The intro in real life,
It is.
IRL.
Yes.
Okay. So I want you to kick things off. Well, first off, I need you to know that this is my very first interview in our new house in my podcast bunker in Missouri. So we're kicking it off here. So this is a big deal to me. All right. No
Awesome.
pressure.
No pressure at all.
So I want you to kick it off. I want you to tell me the story about what made you decide to kind of pivot and become a business strategist. Like what motivated you to do that? Tell us that story.
Yeah, so I had a really long-standing career, working in the nonprofit sector, primarily as a gun for hire. And I would go in and I would help nonprofits that were kind of struggling, be able to get on the right track again. So I was known for coming in and doing a lot of launching. I would come in and raise a lot of money. I would retool operations. Kind of did the whole gamut of like, the behind the scenes to the front of the house. I also founded my own nonprofits along the way. So I founded two national nonprofits that ran in Canada, where I'm located. And one ran successfully for close to 10 years, and the other one still runs, but I'm just like founder on paper. And there's a CEO in place, and she does all of that. So for me, what ended up happening was I became a mom actually. And I had my daughter later in life. And I decided that I was like, I'm taking time. I'm going to really sink into this motherhood thing, really enjoy it. And when I went back to work, I made the decision that I wasn't going to go back into the career that I had because it was really high pressure. I was on all the time and, kind of selling constantly, really a lot of public eye work. So lots of traveling. And so I made this decision. I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm going to go back out and I'm going to really, focus on doing something that's a bit quieter and a bit tamer. And I walked right back into my career is what I did. I picked up exactly where I left off, but now I was doing it with a little person. So I decided that, this just really wasn't the thing for me. And I stepped out and started trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And actually just as I did that, the pandemic hit. And I was trying to help women understand how to be able to re-enter the workforce after taking extended leave to have families. And my business that I was running at the time disappeared. So the minute there was no work for women to go back to,
All
which
right.
is what happened in Canada, was we got hit the hardest up here. I had to pivot. And so what happened was women were coming to me and saying, can you teach me how to make money? I have to replace my income. And I was like, well, yeah, I can do that. It's what I did for 20 years as a career. Like I'll teach you how to start a business. And so that's what led me to where I am now. It really was born out of the pandemic and out of a need that women had to learn how to replace their incomes. And I was able to teach them how to do that in 12 months. So
That's amazing. And
yeah.
so many podcasts and podcast ideas and brands were born out of the pandemic. We had extra time and all sorts of new pain points raised their head. Like everybody learned how to be on Zoom. My parents know how to be on Zoom. It's like they could barely check Facebook before. So it's really interesting how that shifted everything for us. So um, something that you talk about on your show, and when we do private conversations, we check in a lot. We're pod pals, we're friends. You talk about always having something to actively sell, having
Yeah.
something to drive people who are interested in working with you towards and have that monetary exchange, be able to make some damn money is what I'm trying to say here. So can you define that for our audience? Like, what do you mean by always having something to sell?
So I'm going to back it up just a little bit. First of all, if we can talk a little bit before having this something to sell, is really, first of all, understanding some foundational things in your business that are necessary to have in your business before you even start thinking about always having something to sell. And I think it's why that's important is that a lot of us kind of jump out and we do like offer creation and we create offers and create offers and create offers and create offers and create offers. And what we end up with is what I call the Schitt's Creek menu of businesses. So we have this like menu that opens up and there's pages and pages of things. And, I've got a little from column A and a little from column B, and I've got a whole bunch from column Z. And people look at us and they're like, I don't understand what you do. And you're like, but I can do everything. And it's like, that's not what people are looking for. Like they're not looking for the everything model, they're looking for the experts. So before we kind of dial into always having something to sell, I think it's really important to understand the foundational five so you know where to start, so you can create the right offers and then know how to sell those on a continuous basis. So do
Yes.
you don't mind if I back up a bit?
Yes, because I've
Okay.
got my Kajabi graveyard, as I call it, and like for my health days, I would just create so many things and spend so much time
Yeah.
that on things that I thought were cool and no one else did.
Yes.
So this is important. This is why I'm bringing you on the show for some no BS business uh, tutoring here. So
Tutoring.
let's dive in. Let's
All
dive
right.
in.
So the really you just nailed it with the first thing is we tend to create things because we think it's cool, but the very first thing we should be understanding and that first foundational piece is what problem do we solve? And we have to understand that in our business from day one because people buy for one reason. They have a problem. That's why they buy. So if we don't actually understand what their problem is and understand what that problem looks like, we can never create an offer that's the right offer for them. So, first of all, dial in on that. What problem do you solve? The next thing that you need to think about is really being aware of the level of awareness that your ideal person or your ideal listener has about their own problem. Because there's different stages of awareness. And people talk a lot when they're about selling and launching, a lot about like, add bonuses and, stack your offers and do all of these things. But those really are not the main motivators why someone's going to actually give you money. The main reason is because they have a problem, but we need to understand the level of knowledge they have about that problem so we can meet them where they're at. So if they're like, I don't even realize I have a problem, like then you're in trouble trying to sell to that audience because you're going to spend all your time trying to convince them that there's something wrong. Versus if someone's like, oh no, I know I have a problem. I just need someone to validate that. Then you know where to start your conversations with them. So that's really important. The third piece of it is making sure you have the right offer in place. And that's when dialing in and saying, like, not all offers are the right offers. I've been guilty of it too, creating things where I'm like, this is the coolest idea ever. And then you put it out there and everyone's like, we don't care.
Crickets.
Whatever. Yep. So really making sure that the offer is the right one that's aligned again to solving that problem. And the last two parts of it really come down to, can you clearly articulate the benefits that you're going to add to that person's life if they buy from you and how you are unique in comparison to your competition? So before we start selling and before we even think about how we're going to sell, those five things need to be in place in our business so we know where to start the conversation. And that's so important. And those things are missed a lot when we first start. Think about like, I want to sell more things. We go to the creation mode instead of going to let's dial down on the foundations and let's get really, really, really clear on knowing what we're doing and how we can talk to the people that we're here to serve.
Yes, and like you and I've had the conversation that in the last several weeks is that when I was able to clearly define my ideal listener journey, which takes care of a lot of what you talked about there, that was such a game changer. I quit wasting my time creating offers for areas of that journey that people really weren't ready to be served at. And I figured out where most of the people were stuck. And like you've done the same thing. We've had that conversation with your group. It's like, wow, this is just so enlightening and it just feels so aligned when you figure out what you just described. And now all of a sudden, I'm not wasting my time with this offer creation that, filming videos and putting content together and building out a course roadmap or whatever it is. Like we feel like that's productive time, not gee whiz, I hope this works this time. So
Yeah.
it's very encouraging.
Yeah, it's true. And so then once like, we have that in place, then we're able to understand now how to be able to have something to sell all the time and knowing what that looks like. So the reason we want to make sure that we have our foundations in place is so when we go out and we start doing our marketing, that our back end can support the influx. And that's what's going to happen is, what this is the dream we all want, right? We get out there and everyone's like, oh my gosh, I want to work with you. And we get that flood. And if we haven't done that back end support of having all of the things there ready for us, then your people are going to fall out of your funnel. You're going to have refund rates that are going to be way higher than they should be. People are going to be disappointed, and we're going to get a bad reputation for ourselves in business versus having the boring stuff there first, then go out and start bringing people in. And you're just going to start running like clockwork. Like it's a smooth ride instead of it always being that panic selling that people tend to do.
Well, I like that phrase, doing the boring stuff. You talk about that a lot on your show and on Instagram. And I love that because people just sensationalize all the IG influencers that you and I both love to make fun of. They're like, they have all these phrases that get people like, the hustle and, living the dream, all this stuff where it's over sensationalized and it's not the real stuff that actually works. And you talk about the boring stuff, the foundational principles that we need to stick to. And if we do that and then just put in reps, it is kind of automatic. So yeah, that's something I really appreciate about you and your brand is that like you are very to the point and you don't put all the fluff in there. So I think that's why I'm obsessed with your show.
Yeah, I always try to be honest about how boring it is what I actually teach. Like I'm the person who teaches value propositions, and I actually call it a value proposition. I don't have a fancy marketing term for it. It's a value proposition. It's what it is. But when we skip over that stuff, that's when we get ourselves into trouble in business, and that's why we stumble, and that's why we don't make the type of money we should be making. And it's not as exciting. It is not as exciting as doing reels, and it's not as exciting as doing lives and the other parts of it, but they're so important if you actually want a business that's sustainable. And that's what we all want. We want to be able to say we're helping people, we're changing lives, but we're also helping ourselves and our families. And that's really where it comes from. It's the boring stuff. I'm really
Yep.
sorry to say it, but it's what it is.
Yeah. The boring stuff pays the bill. So
It does.
I'm interested to pick your brain on this always having something to sell idea. And also I love getting in front of somebody like you and tossing the idea out like of a monetization portfolio. Like with me, I'm really big on, I like to have some sort of a coaching offer, some sort of a small group thing, stuff that I'm like front facing involved in. That's higher ticket stuff. And I also like some sort of recurring income, a recurring revenue stream so that we know the bills are getting paid on average about this month. So this much each month. So that's something that I like with my monetization portfolio. So let's talk about making money. Let's talk about having something to sell into. And also maybe where do you suggest people start? Is it a course? Is it coaching? Like, do you have any thoughts on that? So let's dive into that topic.
Sure. So I think the first thing to realize or think about when you're thinking about like how are you going to set up what your suite is? That's how I refer to it. So what's my suite going to be that I have? What am I going to sell? What are the different things that I'm going to have at different price levels and how they're going to help people at the different spots that they are in their problem journey is really dialing down to where are you in your business. So again, if you're early stage in business, I would always recommend starting with one offer and run that offer for a year instead of trying to do too many things in your business at once. Because again, we go back to the Schitt's Creek menu where we have a tendency to get really charmed by all of the shiny things. And so we're like, oh, I have this great idea and I have this other great idea. And as like entrepreneurs, our brains fire differently. Like I can look at a leaf on a ground and I could be like, I just invented the best business ever. And it's where my brain will go to there.
Yeah.
But it's about like dialing back on that and understanding that the best thing to do in business from day one is getting really clear at being excellent at something and doing it over and over and over again for a year and then adding to your suite. So once you get that one thing dialed in on, now it's time to go to 2, then it's time to go to 3, and ultimately 4 is kind of where I would say to cap it. But the first one, like starting really is going to be understanding again, what is the problem you're solving? And so what do your people really need? I like courses. Like that's where I started with my business. I created my first course. I launched it for a year. I'm working with a lot of people privately now, helping them to be able to get like their offer dialed in and be able to get that launch going. But it can also start differently. Like it could start with a membership. It could start with a workshop. It could start with something that's one-on-one. It really, again, is going to be a combination, I think, of what your expertise is and what your audience needs. And that's really kind of understanding the two things.
Okay. Multiple questions popping into my
Okay.
brain region here, Jan. I know my listeners are thinking, what if we stick to Jan's one offer rule? That's what we're going to call it. That it shall forever be known as Jan's one
Just
single
one.
offer per year rule. Um, how do we know when to cut bait? How do we know when to be like, oh, this isn't working? So is there a stop sign, a goalpost that we go, okay, if these types of things are happening, we need to quit and try something else and try that for a year. Any suggestions around that?
Oh yeah, totally. That's a great question. So definitely there are. So this again goes back to boring stuff, and this is the stuff that I like totally nerd out on, and other people are like, "Why are you so excited about this?" But it's data. That's what we come back to. So like anything else, we check our downloads on our podcasts, and we're really like, we watch those like hawks all the time. I'm always refreshing every day to see where I'm at with things. It's the same when we're looking at any kind of launches that we're doing or anything we're doing about selling for a year, which is you need to have a good solid 6 months behind you before you can make any kind of intellectual decision of whether something's working or not working. So I will always say launch for 6 months. And if after 6 months you're not seeing things going up, then cut bait. Like that's the time to do it. Because 6 months is what the normal amount of traction it usually takes for us to get some kind of response in our business where we're seeing growth begin to happen. Some people can do it faster. Some people will take a little bit more time, but 6 months is a pretty good stage to sit and say, okay, if I'm launching successfully and I'm consistent about my launches, like I'm not kind of half, whatting it, I'm actually out there full, whatting it. And you're getting out there and you're saying, okay, I'm launching, every month and I'm running my funnel successfully. I'm getting people in, I'm being able to convert, and maybe my conversion started at like 2%. Now they're at 5. Now they're maybe going to 7. We're going to 8. Keep going. Like if you're in the conversion rates are going up, you're doing something right. Now it's a matter of just trying to figure out how to build audience more than anything else. And I can teach you some tricks on that. But if you're not seeing conversion rates actually going anywhere or they're sliding backwards, then you've got a problem in your funnel. And it's probably time to sit down and really take a hard look at, again, do you have the right offer in place? And do you really understand that problem you're trying to solve? Or did you create something because you just thought it was cool?
Okay. The next question to unpack this is during that first 6 months to a year that we're trying out this offer and tweaking it and trying to get the word out there, what are like Jan Ditchfield's minimum effort standards of, like, I've fallen in that trap before. I was just like a serial course creator. I would just create a course, mention it once on the show. Oh, nobody liked it. Let's create another course. So what's like minimum effort to get the actual word out? Are we running Facebook ads? Are we talking about it on the show? Are we email marketing? Like, give us some standards of like effort level that you would like to see out of somebody that's doing this 1 year experiment with one offer.
So I have a funnel system that I teach, and to me, I feel like it's the thing that takes a lot of the stress out of understanding how to launch. Because again, we do that, right? You're like, I put something out there. Well, I've talked about it 2 times and no one bought. Well, nobody heard it. If you only said it 2 times, nobody heard you. I can guarantee it. I like to joke with my students, like it's the rule of 7. So we need to say it 7 times before somebody actually registers. And now say it 7 more times. Now people are starting to hear you, and talk now to the point where you're sick of hearing yourself. That's the sweet spot. Like that's the spot.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
Like if you're like, I can't stand myself anymore. Now people are starting to listen to you. That's where you want to be. So launching and selling is not something that you kind of go out and say, if you're shy or you're not as necessarily as comfortable in sales, this is kind of the time to be like, okay, I'm going to lift my feelings about it and put it to the side. And I'm just going to dial in on putting a funnel in place that's going to be smooth and it's going to be monthly, and I'm going to consistently lead people into my offer. And that's what I would say is like looking at running monthly funnels. I think it works best if you can create something where you have what I like to call a community cultivation magnet, and you bring people into some place where you can teach to them or sell to them in a group format. And so it takes away that the impersonal aspect of selling off of social or selling off of our podcast sometimes, and putting them into a place where we can use some old school sales techniques to increase our conversion rates. But you need to be doing it monthly. Like you have got to sell every single month for 6 months before you can even make a decision if something's working or not.
Okay. So I'm starting to put the pieces together. As always, I'm thinking like, how does this apply to me? Like, how does this work for me? So we want to focus on one offer for the first year. We got to give it effort, a strong effort for at least the first 6 months before we even think about changing, quitting, ditching it. And we want to have some sort of sales driven opportunity or piece of content that we put out each month. Am I on the right track so far?
You're on the right track. Yep.
Okay. Well, let's talk about like how to make this a little more funnelicious. So I know that you're good at the funneliciousness. So when we talk about that monthly thing, is that a webinar? Is that like what I'm doing with Pod Pals? Like, how do you see what's most effective that you're seeing out there with that 1 month sales push?
Yeah. So when I talk about creating something that's like the community cultivation magnet, I'm not talking about webinars or master classes. Those work really well for some people, but they tend to work well for people who have very large audiences or people who have large budgets for ads. So if you're trying to grow an organic business, which is it's what I teach organic growth strategy, organic sales strategies. It's different for us because we tend to have smaller audiences. Our audiences are usually way more engaged than the large audiences are. So there's higher opportunities for us to be able to convert at rates that are like beyond what the norm is in the industry. So the normal rates are usually 3 to 5%. My conversion rates usually sit between 20 and 35%. So when I'm doing a sale, that's what I can budget based on. I'm going to have a much larger conversion off of it because of the way I sell. And it's not just like, here's my master class, now click the button and buy from me. It's a very different process. So the first thing I would say is when you're thinking about what to create, look at your audience. So could it be something where you're running a boot camp? Could you do something where you're doing a boot camp that could be a 30-day boot camp? That's one of my boot camps is a 30-day, and it's people wait list for it for a year because it's that awesome. I will say, quite honestly, it's really great. It could be something where you're doing a challenge. So you could do a 10-day challenge or a 5-day challenge. You could do a workshop series as well. You could do a podcast series that sells into something as well. It just needs to be an opportunity for people to get to know you in a more intimate way than just being on the other end of a slideshow presentation. So that's really what I'm looking at. Is like, how can you get them to come in? You can love on them. You can nurture those relationships. You can really go deep on teaching. And you can do something that's really different than what most people do in our space, which is, again, going back to here's another webinar, here's another webinar, here's another webinar. So that'd be step one. Yeah.
Can you give me an example of like your last launch? Like I know you had a launch recently. Can you just use that as an example of what you're promoting and the cultivation magnet experience that you created for that launch?
Yeah, for sure. So if I can use my big one actually is the example for my boot camp. So I have run the Business Idea Boot Camp, and it's what it is a 30-day boot camp. And in there, I have a Facebook group where I invite women to come and join me. I've had men come too. Some very brave men have come in. And when they've come in and hung out with me for 30 days. And in that time period, I teach 8 things that are specific to 8 key decisions that you need to make in order to start a profitable business or to make the one that you have right now profitable. And those 8 pieces come directly from my program. So they're like content I teach in there, and I bring it down. And basically at the end of those 30 days with me, you leave with a business blueprint in your hand, like a little business canvas that you can then take away and you can go and you can implement it on your own, or you can come and join me in my program where I'm going to expand on that and build on it. So during that time, we hang out together. I teach, I show up, I do Q&As. We do hot seats where you can come hang out with me on camera. I coach you, help you really dive in on your business. I do wicked giveaways. We have so much fun with the giveaways. I host a private VIP channel where I share content there that's not shared inside the Facebook group. And then I also have an email sequence that runs on the back end. So when you come in, it's an experience. That's what it is. Like people come into it, they plan it on their calendar, they jump in, and I show up and I just serve. Like you talk about it all the time, Adam. Like we're here to serve. And that's again the benefit of when we are kind of at that guru level, right? Where we're so high up on the ladder, people want to learn from people like us because we've done what they want to do, but we're relatable. And it's like, I'm just teaching you exactly what I know how to do. It's what I've done for 20 plus years. It's what led me to making over 22 million in revenue. Like this is the path. I can show you how to walk it, but I'm going to do it for free. And then in that process, I feel like I've earned the right then to ask you to join me as a student. And if you want to come in and work with me, that's great. And if you don't, that's okay too. Because at that point, I feel like I've done my job. So the conversions begin to happen naturally, and it isn't so heavy like you feel like you have to be like, closing, closing, closing. The work just kind of speaks for itself instead.
So, how do you determine what you give away for free versus what people are paying for? That's a question I get a lot, especially when we
Yeah.
talk about this, like a boot camp, a challenge, a freebie that leads into some sort of a sales opportunity. How do you draw that line?
So I always say to give away 90% of your best stuff and hold 10% back. And the 10% back that I always say to hold is the stuff that would like the last piece of the puzzle. So if we think of it, I like talking analogies all the time. I was an English lit major, so everything has to be an analogy for me in some way. But if we think about it, like again, if you're looking at a puzzle and you've got the whole puzzle in front of you, but you're missing that centerpiece and it drives you nuts because you're like, I know I need that in order for this to actually work and look beautiful. And I can say I've done it and I can say that like I've mastered this skill. If we hold that one piece back, that's the thing that people come in and pay for is that last missing piece of the puzzle. So whatever is, if you have a secret sauce or a secret way of doing something, or for me, one of the things that I never teach publicly is value propositions. It's one of the hardest things to put in your business. It's one of, if you don't, it's so important to your business, but I don't teach them publicly. I teach it privately with my students. And we spend a lot of time on that. And it's known, people know, they're like, oh, I need my value proposition. Jan's going to help me get that nailed. We do that inside of my program, Impact Business Academy. So finding that 10% is what you want to hold back, but don't be afraid to give away your good stuff. Like, don't be afraid. It's why people will convert more often.
Okay. And that's definitely in line with the way I think. I'm always like, I'm going to give away my stuff, but you're going to pay me to help you implement correctly and put
Exactly.
it all in the right order and
Yeah.
all that. So,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
it's exactly what it is. And I think like, as a student with you, it was the same thing where I could listen to all of your content and I could apply it. But then I came in and worked with you and it was like the pickup was crazy how fast it happened because I got your brain. And that's what people are paying for, right? Is that I want your brain. I want to be able to work with you and help you guide and shape this with me. So
I
that's
want
where
your
that's
brain,
that
go.
10%. I want your brain. Yep.
Okay. When it comes to sales, a lot of people get nervous. A lot of people fumble on the 1 yard line. We aren't great at it. I'm not great at it. I structure all my programs so that I don't have to be real super salesy. So any tips for the non-salesy salesperson or the people that are a little sales phobic or sales shy when it comes to, all right, we've put together a great experience. People are into our stuff. Like, how do we get over ourselves and not screw up the easy sales that could be just the low hanging fruit right there, ready to happen?
So I would always say the best way to do it is start running your social media or your content creation like a funnel. And it's where I would say the easiest way to get over this fear of selling and always thinking that I have to be selling is learning how to sell without selling. So in content creation, like most of us are taught, right? Like we should look out a month out, we should know what we're talking about. I always say look a month out with what you're selling. I ideally look a year out with what you're selling. But if you're saying I'm going to run into, an offer this month, then I want to backtrack up and say, well, there's 4 weeks that I need in that runway. Like you should have a minimum of 4 weeks in all of runways for selling something. And those 4 weeks are going to be each one of the stages of my funnel. So week one, I'm going to really dial in on focusing on putting out content that's awareness-based content. So I'm going to talk about reflecting the problem back to my ideal person, which is why it's so important to understand what the problem is and where they're at with it. I'm going to be able to help people be aware of I have a solution for them, help them be aware that my business exists. I'm going to talk a little bit about me. I'm going to talk a whole lot about you, and I'm going to run that for a week. Then the next week, I'm going to move into the interest week. And this is our funnel where we're really moving into talk about that know like trust factor. This is all about getting to like somebody. This is the week where we talk about content that is really about why and how content. So how your life could change or how your life could be different or why you should know this or why you should know that. Really doing things that pique people's interests, and also a lot of entertainment content, because this is where we want to focus on people liking us, like looking and being like, I really like this person. Like, I enjoy their content. I think they're hilarious, or I think they're really informed, or I think they're really ballsy. Like, whatever your brand is, put it into this week. The next week, when we move into phase 3 step, is all about talking about decision-making content. So this is the type of content where you want to lean into social proof. So show testimonials, bring people on and let people sell for you. Social proof is amazing, especially for those of us who don't like to sell, because you don't have to talk about yourself. You just open up the gate and let somebody else do all the talking about you. I love them. They're fantastic. I got results like this. And you just kind of show it to your audience and say, this could be you too. You could also have this experience if you come and work with me. And then stage 4, which is going to be your week 4, is all about things that are encouraging people to take action. So this is when you need to sell. This is when you actually, like, doors are closing, enrollment's open, get in now. It won't happen again. This is the one-time price I'm going to be doing. You did that a lot with your program as well, when you were like talking about the beta price, the beta price, the beta price. Like, that is action content, like join, 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 join. And then the next month, you're going to start all over again. And the nice thing is, when you get that funnel down, is you can lift your content and just recreate it for every single launch, instead of having to think about, starting from scratch all the time. So that's my number 1 tip. The number 2 tip would be, don't think about selling as sales. Think about it as service. And I talk a lot with my students about this. Every one of us is given a gift. Like, we are been put here because we can do something better than somebody else. And we can help somebody in a way that's deeper and more meaningful than somebody else. And if we have the solution to the problem that person's facing, then it's our responsibility to help them. And the only way we can help them is by selling them what we have. So when we start thinking about service and being able to help people more often, and how this is actually making people's lives better because we're showing up and helping, it takes away the stigma that tends to get put against selling. Instead, so people start thinking about, well, I'm just here to make someone's life better. So it makes it easier to say, buy from me. That is to be like, I have a target and I better hit my target and my revenue goals. And then we start to feel kind of slimy with what we're doing. So
Yeah.
sales is service. That's really what it is.
Damn, Jan, this is some next level shit here, girl. Okay. You got my brainwaves cooking on this 4-week thing. You, like, being from I don't know if you know this, I was a strength and conditioning coach for like 10 years. So I was all about developing 12-week training cycles and all this stuff. So I love all that stuff. Is the 4-week protocol that you just described, is that leading up to the activation event, or is that leading up into the sale of the thing? Is that making sense? So is that
It does.
4
Yeah, it does.
weeks and
Yeah.
we are promoting, the main goal is to get people to that activation event, and then the activation event gets them into the paid service. Is that correct thinking or no?
So yes and no. And so it depends if you have something where you have an evergreen product. So if you have something that's available to sell, to buy at any point, then you don't need to do the 4 weeks, 4 weeks, like, kind of lead into it. You could just run your funnel every 4 weeks with a call to be, buy my thing, buy my thing, buy my thing, buy my thing. And you could just run it that way. If you have something where you're doing live launching, which is what a lot of us like to do. I love live launching personally. I've been live launching for 20 plus years. I love doing it, but that's when we would be doing it a little bit differently. So you would have your 4-week funnel that would be all about getting into that event. So coming into my boot camp, or coming into my challenge, or
The
whatever,
free thing.
like my free thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
my free thing. And then once people are in there, you start your cycle again. So now we're focused on doing 2 funnels back to back. And the
Okay.
second funnel is buy my stuff. And that's what you're moving them into from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
That painted a much clearer picture. So if we're live launching, 4-week cycle to drive towards the free event that's going to activate our people, get them off the sidelines, get them into the game, and then a 4-week cycle with those people to get them into the paid service.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's like why you have a 30-day boot camp. That way you have a full 4 weeks to sell into.
Yeah, I do. And even when I run my other one, I ran a shorter one earlier this year, and that one was just it was a 10-day. It was I called it a 10-day boot camp, and I just taught for 3 days. But in there as well, I still had the same funnel running. It was just a condensed funnel, so you can You can move them tighter if you want, but I would recommend definitely like don't make them so tight that you don't have enough room at the beginning of it. And like one more analogy, and I'll stop with the analogies, I promise, Adam. But I always say that launching really is like the same as trying to start a car in the winter. And I'm in Canada, so like if our cars start in the winter, we are very happy about it.
Yeah.
But most of the time, like if you live in a cold climate, what we do is we run out, we jump in the car, we crank the engine, and then we take our credit card out and we scrape like just enough that we can see out the dashboard, cross our fingers and drive. And if we do the same thing with launches, you have no idea what's going to happen. Like it is not the way to do it. Whereas if we went the opposite way of saying, okay, I'm going to go out, I'm going to start my car, I'm going to come back in the house, I'm going to have a cup of coffee while the car warms up. Now I'm going to go back out, I'm going to clean the car off. Well, I'm going to come back and have a second cup of coffee. Well, I'm going to go back out now and I'm going to sit in the car and talk nicely to it for a little bit. Now I'm going to drive it. People are primed, right? The car, you're going to have a smooth journey. Your bum is warm. You got nothing on your windows. You're not going to get a ticket because there's snow on your roof, and you're going to you're going to go where you need to go. So it's the same with our launching. If we prime our launches and we spend time warming our audience up so that when we walk in and start asking, people are ready for it and they're really listening and really engaged instead of it just kind of being like, behind a dashboard being like, I hope to God I don't hit anything. So think of it that way instead. The more we give our audience the chance to see what's coming and be able to be part of it, the better your conversion rates will be.
Okay. Along those lines of conversion rates, let's say some listeners, they are full on Jan Ditchfielding this, and they've got a 4-week, content creation protocol that goes into a live launch boot camp sort of a thing. And then they go into like, let's sell our course mode, and very few people buy, or, a lot fewer people than they had hoped buy, which is a typical first experience for most people.
Yeah.
What do we go back and analyze to fix it? I mean, are we thinking, do we need to, is it the course? Did we screw up our marketing? Like if we're going to go back and the launch didn't go as planned sales wise, give us a few points to go back and analyze and see if we can figure out what happened.
So I would say the very first thing to look at is going to be your conversion data. So if you are coming out of a launch and you have set a target or you haven't set a target, some people like to set them, some people don't. If you have done less than 3%, which means the number of people that were in that activation, right, your free offer, who ended up buying into your paid offer, if it was less than 3% that converted, then you definitely have a problem with something that's going on with the offer or with your funnel. If you are in the 3 to 5%, don't sweat it. Like just keep doing what you're doing and watch the next one and see what happens with that. Cause that's pretty normal numbers. Like they sound really low, but it's actually the norm. Like the big gurus, they convert at 3%. So don't worry too much about it. If you are in 0 to 3%, that's when you want to sit down and say, okay, something's not working right. So first thing I would look at is, do you know the problem? Again, like what's the problem that you're solving, and have you clearly solved it in your offer? And do those two things match up? So if you're kind of like, well, I think I know the problem, or I think I understand the problem, then you don't know it. If you have to say, I think I know the problem, you absolutely don't know it. You need to get you really dialed in on it. And then if you're like, I think my offer is the right offer, go back and validate. Because if you haven't spent time, again, talking to your audience earlier on and saying things like, I'm planning on creating something and I'm thinking about it's going to look this way. Would you like it like this? Would you prefer to have it this way? How would you like to participate in it? You can do it in stories on Instagram. You could do it through surveys to your audience in email. But spending time actually getting the feedback from your people, that's really what's going to give you the insight to, again, what's off with your offer. Also, I would also recommend going back and doing a survey for people who didn't buy from you, asking why they didn't buy, and not in an aggressive way, like not in a like, why didn't you buy from me? What did I do wrong? But one of those things of saying like, did you feel aligned to this, or did you feel it was going to take too much time? Like, what were the objections? Like, really understand those, because that's where you're going to get your information on what to be able to tweak. Usually, it isn't our marketing. Like, it actually usually is not our marketing that's the problem. It's rarely ever our price point that's the problem. People usually think it's pricing. It really isn't. It's usually because either we didn't solve the problem properly, we didn't spend enough time busting objections before we started selling. And the last one is we really do not understand where our people are at right now. Like we're not speaking to them. We think we are, but we're not. We're not hitting them right on
Mm.
the mark and getting into people's heads. Like I talk a lot about this again with my students of if you really want to understand the people you serve, ask yourself the question of what wakes them up at 3 in the morning. Like, you know that feeling, Adam, right? When
Yes,
you wake up at
yes.
3 and you're staring at the ceiling and your brain is racing and your heart's going and you are just worrying about something, what made you wake up? Because if you can get into their head and you can understand that, you will know how to run your business. You will know how to do your marketing. You'll know how to do your funnels. You'll know how to do your offer. You'll know everything. But don't be afraid to get into the head and like the psyche of the people that you are here to serve, because not enough time people spend time there. They just create and sell instead of stopping and saying, actually, am I really serving them with what it is I'm doing?
Jan, you're on fire, my friend.
I'm on fire.
I love it. I love it. Now, we only got a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. For all you listening in, I'm going to invite Jan the week that this episode goes live, which I think is early August. I'm going to invite her on my IG because I have several questions about how she maps out her year of content launching, her launch schedule. So we'll cover that in the live. So make sure that you follow Podcasting Business School on the gram. But Jan, you do something on your show that, I kind of helped you get figured out and dialed in. You do a business funnel audit. And I think everyone that's listening to this show could benefit from you digging into their website, their where they start to what they're selling and everything in between. Like, you do a great job with your show, with these episodes. So how do people get signed up for that? Where do people go to find all your stuff? Let's plug all things Jan Ditchfield.
Plug. Okay. So you can sign up for my business audits at janditchfield.co/audit. And you can hang out with me on my podcast for 30 minutes. And like I said, you mentioned I will rip into your funnel and help you fix things. I go deep. So it's not a superficial 30 minutes with me. Like we're going to get stuff figured out in your business. You can follow me on Instagram at janditchfield.co. You can find me on the web at janditchfield.co. You can find me on Facebook at janditchfield.co. I am everywhere, janditchfield.co. And that's where you can get into my world and check out my reels, because I do reels on an obnoxious level of
awesome.
reel making. So yeah, but and my podcast as well is No BS Business School that can be found on all the major players.
Yeah, I want everybody as homework, go and listen to No BS Business School and listen to some of her funnel audits. They are amazing. You will be inspired. You have so many ideas, and then sign up for one yourself. So Jan, I'm so excited that we got to knock out this episode today. I appreciate you so much. I love what you're doing. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. Can't wait to continue our friendship and our collaboration situation with some who knows what kind of content we're going to create together. So I appreciate you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate you beyond words as well. So.
All right, Pod Pals, there you have it. What are you going to do? What are you going to take action on? What idea did you have out of this episode? I hope that you take it and you go out and build your business. And with that, I'm going to send you out into the world wishing you health, happiness, and many downloads. We will see you next time.